She woke up from the regression and said 4 words that made no sense. I asked for this. The therapist asked what she meant, and she said it again, louder, more certain. Every terrible thing that happened to me, every trauma, every loss, every moment of pain, I asked for it. I chose it. Before I was born, I asked for more. Dr. Lisa Hayes had been doing life between life regression for 12 years. She'd guided hundreds of people into the space between incarnations, the place where souls rest and plan and choose their next lives. But she'd never heard anyone say they'd asked for more suffering. Most people discovered they'd chosen challenge for growth, difficulty for learning. But this woman, Amanda, was describing something else, something deliberate, something extreme. Amanda had come to therapy because her life had been hell. Childhood abuse, a car accident at 19 that left her partially paralyzed, a marriage that ended in betrayal, the death of her only child, bankruptcy, chronic illness, loss after loss after loss. By age 42, she was done, ready to give up, convinced that either God hated her or the universe was random and cruel. But something made her try regression. One last attempt to understand why her life had been so hard. The session started normally. Amanda closed her eyes, followed Dr. Hayes' voice down into trance, went through the process of dying from her most recent past life, and then crossed over into the space between, the realm where souls exist outside of bodies, outside of time, where you remember who you really are. Dr. Hayes asked her to describe what she saw. Amanda's voice changed, became calmer, clearer, like she was accessing a deeper knowing. I'm in a space of light. It's not bright like the sun. It's soft, comfortable, and I'm not alone. There are others here. My group, the souls I travel with, the ones I've known for thousands of years across hundreds of lives, we're gathered, talking, planning, preparing for the next incarnation. Who's with you? Amanda described them, not by name, by feeling, by the energy they carried. There was one who felt like safety, like home, one who felt like challenge, like growth, one who felt like mirror, like reflection, and one who felt like teacher, like wisdom. These were her core group, the souls who incarnated with her again and again in different roles, sometimes family, sometimes enemies, sometimes strangers who appeared at exactly the right moment. What are you planning? The next life, my current life. We're choosing what we'll learn, what roles we'll play, how we'll help each other grow. And I'm being given options. Guides are showing me different possible lives, different paths I could take, different lessons I could focus on. Describe the options. There were 3. The first was an easy life, born into wealth, health, stability, no major trauma, no significant challenge. A life where I could coast, enjoy, experience pleasure and comfort, but limited growth, limited evolution, limited contribution. And you didn't choose that one. No, because I'd done that before, in my last life. I was born into privilege, had everything I needed, and I wasted it. I lived for myself, for pleasure, for comfort. And when I died and reviewed that life, I saw how little I'd grown, how much time I'd wasted, how many opportunities I'd missed to help others or evolve my consciousness. And I didn't want to repeat that pattern. So what was the second option? A moderate life, some challenge, some ease, balance. I'd be born into a middle-class family, loving parents, good education. I'd face normal difficulties, relationship issues, career setbacks, health scares, but nothing extreme, nothing that would break me. A life where I could learn at a steady pace, grow gradually, contribute modestly. And you didn't choose that either. Amanda went quiet. Her breathing changed when she spoke again. Her voice was different, heavier, like she was carrying something. No, because I wanted more. I wanted to grow faster. I wanted to contribute more. I wanted to help wake people up. And the guides told me that required a harder path. That comfort doesn't create the kind of transformation I was seeking. That ease doesn't forge the depth of compassion and wisdom I wanted to develop. So they showed me the third option. What was the third option? A life of extreme difficulty. Born into trauma, abuse from the start. A body that would be damaged. A mind that would struggle. Losses that would pile up. Pain that would push me to my absolute limit. A life that would break most souls. That would crush them. That would make them give up. Why would they offer that? Because I asked for it. I told them I wanted to accelerate my growth, that I was willing to suffer if it meant I could evolve faster. that I wanted to develop the kind of strength and compassion that only comes from experiencing darkness and choosing light anyway. And they warned me. They said this path would be hard, harder than anything I'd experienced in previous lives, that there would be moments when I'd forget why I chose it, when I'd cursed existence, when I'd want to die. But if I could make it through, if I could transmute the pain into wisdom, I'd help countless others. I'd become a teacher, a healer, a light for people drowning in their own darkness. And you said yes. Yes, I said yes. I chose the hard path. I asked for more. Dr. Hayes felt chills. This explained everything. Amanda's life wasn't random cruelty. It wasn't punishment. It was a curriculum, a deliberate training program her own soul had designed. Did you choose the specific events, the abuse, the accident, the losses? Not the exact details, but the general structure. I chose to be born into a family with unhealed trauma. I chose a body that would be vulnerable to injury. I chose relationships that would challenge me. I chose circumstances that would force me to develop inner strength because I'd have no external support. The guides helped me design it. They asked what lessons I wanted to focus on, what qualities I wanted to develop, and then they showed me how those lessons typically manifest. Through difficulty, through loss, through being tested beyond what seems bearable. What lessons did you want to focus on? Forgiveness, resilience, faith, compassion, surrender, the big ones. The lessons that most souls avoid because they're too painful. And the guides told me I couldn't learn those in a comfortable life. That you don't learn forgiveness when people treat you well. You learn it when they hurt you and you choose to forgive anyway. You don't learn resilience when life is easy. You learn it when you're broken and you choose to rebuild. You don't learn faith when everything works out. You learn it when everything falls apart and you trust anyway. Dr. Hayes asked her to move forward, to see the moment before birth. The moment when the plan became reality. Amanda described it. She was in a council room, a space where souls meet with their guides and teachers before incarnating. They were doing the final review, going over the life plan one more time, making sure she understood what she was agreeing to, making sure she was ready. One of the guides asked if she wanted to change anything, if she wanted to make the path easier, choose fewer challenges, space out the difficulties, and Amanda said no. She wanted the accelerated program. The advanced curriculum, the hardest possible path, because she believed she could handle it, because she wanted to help people who'd experienced similar darkness. And to do that credibly, to do that from genuine understanding, she needed to live it herself. The guides told her she could ask for help, that she wouldn't be abandoned, that support would be available at key moments, that certain souls had agreed to appear when she needed them most, to offer comfort, guidance, reminders of who she really was. And she thanked them. But she was clear. She didn't want an easy life. She wanted a meaningful one, even if meaningful meant painful. And then they asked the final question, the one they ask every soul before birth. Are you sure? Because once you go, you'll forget this conversation. You'll forget you chose this. You'll experience it as random suffering, as unfair punishment, as evidence that you're cursed or broken or unlucky. You won't remember that every challenge is something you specifically requested. Can you handle that level of forgetting? Amanda said yes, she could handle it. She would handle it. Even in the forgetting, even in the darkest moments, some part of her would remember, some part would know, and that would be enough. And then she was born, into the body, into the family, into the life she'd designed, and the plan unfolded exactly as agreed. The trauma came early. The abuse was severe. Her childhood was a training ground in survival, in learning to find safety when there was none, in developing an inner fortress because the outer world offered no protection. The accident at 19 was a checkpoint, a moment her guides had marked as significant. The injury that left her partially paralyzed was part of the design, not as punishment, as an opportunity to learn about limitation, about accepting what you can't change, about finding strength that doesn't depend on a perfect body, about developing empathy for others living with disability. The betrayal in her marriage was another lesson, about trust, about discernment, about loving people even when they hurt you, about knowing when to stay and when to leave, about forgiving without forgetting. And the death of her child was the hardest one, the test she'd specifically requested, the experience that would either destroy her or transform her completely. The guides had warned her about this one, had asked multiple times if she really wanted to include it, and she'd said yes, because she wanted to understand the depth of human grief. Wanted to know what it felt like to lose everything. wanted to develop the kind of compassion that could hold space for others. Experiencing unbearable loss, Dr. Hayes asked if she could speak with the guides now, if they were present. Amanda said yes, they were always present, always watching, always supporting even when she couldn't feel it. Dr. Hayes asked them directly, why? Why design a life this hard? Why put a soul through this much pain? The answer came through Amanda but wasn't her voice, deeper, older, wiser, because she asked for it. Because she has a mission in this lifetime that requires this level of preparation. Because the work she came to do, the people she came to help, can only be reached by someone who has walked through hell and emerged intact. You cannot guide others through darkness you haven't experienced. You cannot heal wounds you've never felt. She knew this. She volunteered. And we are helping her through it exactly as promised. What's her mission? To help others who are suffering understand that their pain has purpose, that their struggles are not random, that they are stronger than they know, that darkness is temporary and transformation is possible. She will do this through writing, through speaking, through simply being an example of someone who survived what seemed unsurvivable. And her work will help thousands, maybe millions, but only if she completes the curriculum, only if she transmutes the pain instead of letting it destroy her. Is she completing it? She's here, isn't she? She came to therapy instead of suicide. She's seeking understanding instead of numbing. She's asking questions instead of giving up. Yes, she's completing it. And she's almost done. The hardest lessons are behind her. What comes next is integration, application, using what she's learned to serve others. Dr. Hayes asked Amanda to return to her own awareness, to come back from the guide's perspective to her own end. She asked her what she felt knowing all this, knowing she'd chosen every difficulty. Amanda was crying, but not sad tears, relief tears, release tears. I always knew, some part of me always knew this wasn't random, wasn't punishment. I just couldn't access the knowing, couldn't remember, but now I do, and everything makes sense. Every terrible thing that happened was exactly what I asked for, what I needed, what I chose because I wanted to grow faster than a comfortable life would allow. Does that change how you feel about your life? Yes. I'm not a victim. I'm a volunteer. I'm not being punished. I'm being trained. I'm not cursed. I'm committed to growth, to service, to becoming someone who can genuinely help others because I've genuinely survived. When Amanda came out of the regression, she sat in silence for 10 minutes, processing, integrating. Finally, she looked at Dr. Hayes and said something that would become the title of the book she'd write 5 years later. I asked for more, and I got exactly what I asked for, and I'm grateful. The transformation was immediate. Not that her circumstances changed. She was still dealing with chronic pain, still living on disability, still grieving her child, but her relationship to all of it shifted. She stopped seeing herself as a victim of random cruelty, started seeing herself as a soul on an advanced path, a spiritual athlete who'd chosen the hardest training program available. She started writing about her experiences, not as tragedy, as curriculum, not as suffering without meaning, as deliberate challenges chosen for specific growth. And people responded, people who'd been through their own hells, who'd wondered why their lives were so hard while others seemed to coast, who'd felt singled out, punished, cursed. Amanda told them what the guides had told her, that the hardest lives belong to the bravest souls, that extreme difficulty is often a sign of an advanced path, that you don't get the hardest lessons unless you're capable of learning from them, and that pain has purpose even when you can't see it. The responses poured in, thousands of messages from people who'd felt the same way, who'd lived through abuse and loss and trauma and wondered why, who'd felt broken by their experiences, who'd considered giving up. And reading Amanda's words helped them reframe, helped them see their lives differently, helped them access the same knowing she had, that maybe they'd chosen this, that maybe they were stronger than they thought, that maybe their pain was preparing them for something they couldn't yet see. Dr. Hayes watched it unfold, watched Amanda step into the mission the guides had described, watched her transform from victim to teacher, from someone drowning in pain to someone offering lifelines to others. And she understood why the guides had approved such a difficult plan, because Amanda was doing exactly what she'd said she would, using her darkness to light the way for others. But not everyone understood. Amanda faced criticism. People said she was blaming victims, suggesting that people chose their own abuse, making trauma survivors responsible for their suffering. And Amanda had to clarify, over and over. She wasn't saying people consciously chose abuse in this lifetime. She was saying souls chose challenging circumstances before birth as opportunities for growth. And there was a difference. She wrote about it carefully. Explained that remembering you chose difficulty doesn't mean the difficulty wasn't real or valid or painful. It just means you're stronger than you thought, more committed than you knew, part of a larger plan your everyday consciousness can't see. And for people who were ready to hear it, who resonated with that perspective, it was healing, revolutionary, life-changing. 5 years after the regression, Amanda published her book, I Asked for More: How Remembering My Soul's Plan Saved My Life. It became a bestseller in spiritual circles, not because it was easy reading, but because it offered an explanation for suffering that gave it meaning, that transformed victims into volunteers, that suggested pain could have purpose even when it felt random. Dr. Hayes wrote the foreword, described the regression. The moment Amanda accessed the memory of choosing her life plan, the guides who confirmed she'd asked for the hardest path available, the transformation that followed, and she added her own observation, that this wasn't the first case she'd seen like this, that other clients had accessed similar memories, had discovered they'd chosen difficulty, had volunteered for advanced lessons. She called it the volunteer phenomenon, the recognition that some of the people struggling most in life aren't being punished, they're being trained. They're souls who specifically asked for accelerated growth, who chose the hardest incarnations because they wanted to develop quickly, who signed up for the advanced spiritual curriculum even knowing how painful it would be. And once people understood this, once they accessed the memory of choosing, something shifted. The pain didn't disappear, but the relationship to it changed. They stopped asking why me, started asking what am I supposed to learn from this, stopped feeling like victims, started feeling like students, stopped waiting to be rescued, started recognizing they had the strength to complete what they'd begun. Amanda spoke at conferences, did interviews, facilitated workshops where people could access their own soul's plan. And she always said the same thing. I'm not special. I'm not uniquely strong. I'm just someone who remembered, who accessed the knowing that we all have somewhere deep inside, that our lives make sense even when they seem random, that our pain has purpose even when it feels meaningless, that we're all exactly where we chose to be, learning exactly what we came to learn. Some people loved this message, found it empowering, healing, transformative. Others hated it, thought it was spiritual bypassing, toxic positivity, blame disguised as empowerment. And Amanda let both responses exist. Understood that different souls were at different stages, that some people needed to feel their victimhood fully before they could transcend it, that not everyone was ready to remember they'd chosen their challenges. But for those who were ready, the remembering was everything. It gave suffering a context, a framework, a reason, and that made it bearable in a way it hadn't been before. 10 years after the regression, Amanda's chronic pain had decreased significantly. Doctors couldn't explain it. Tests showed her condition should be getting worse, but she was getting better. And Amanda knew why, because the pain had served its purpose. The lesson had been learned. The curriculum was complete. Her body was releasing what it no longer needed to hold. She still missed her child, still grieved, but the grief had transformed, from something that destroyed her to something that deepened her, from a wound to a well, from pain that took to pain that gave, because now when she met other parents who'd lost children, she could hold their grief in a way few people could sit with them in the darkness without trying to fix it, could be a presence that said, I know and I survived and you will too. Dr. Hayes continued studying the phenomenon, documenting cases, interviewing people who'd accessed memories of choosing their life plans, and patterns emerged. The people who remembered choosing difficulty tended to have certain traits. They were sensitive, empathic, deeply feeling. They cared intensely about helping others. They had a sense of mission even when they couldn't articulate it. They felt different from most people around them. And they'd all lived through more than seemed fair. She wrote papers about it, presented at conferences, faced skepticism from colleagues who thought she was projecting meaning onto random suffering, who thought regression memories were fantasy, who couldn't accept that consciousness might exist before birth and plan incarnations deliberately. But the evidence kept accumulating, client after client accessing similar memories, describing the same process, the space between lives, the counsels with guides, the life planning, the choice to incarnate into difficulty, the forgetting, the suffering, and then, For some, the remembering, the moment when it all made sense, and the most consistent finding was this: people who remembered choosing their challenges handled them better, not because the challenges got easier, but because the meaning changed. They stopped feeling victimized, started feeling empowered, stopped asking why this is happening to me, started asking what am I meant to learn. And that shift in perspective made all the difference. Amanda became a regression therapist herself, trained with Dr. Hayes, started guiding others into the space between lives, helping them access their own soul's plan. And session after session, she watched people have the same realization she'd had, that they'd asked for this, that they'd chosen difficulty, that their pain was purposeful, that they were volunteers, not victims. And almost always, after the remembering, things got better, not externally. The circumstances often stayed the same, but internally, the relationship to the circumstances transformed. People stopped fighting reality, started accepting what was, stopped waiting for rescue, started recognizing their own strength, stopped feeling broken, started feeling like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. 20 years after her regression, Amanda looked back on her life with something close to joy, not because it had been easy, it hadn't, but because it had been meaningful. Every loss had taught her something, every trauma had strengthened her, every moment of darkness had deepened her capacity for light. And she'd helped thousands of people transform their own suffering by sharing what she'd learned. She thought about the moment before birth, the moment she'd said yes to the hardest path, the moment she'd asked for more. And she understood now why she'd made that choice, because the person she'd become through walking that path was someone she was proud to be, someone she respected, someone who could genuinely help others. And she couldn't have become that person through an easy life, couldn't have developed this depth through comfort, couldn't have gained this wisdom through ease. The volunteers who choose hard lives know something most people don't. That growth happens at the edges, that strength develops under pressure, that wisdom comes from walking through fire and emerging changed. And they're willing to suffer for it, willing to forget why they chose it, willing to feel like victims even though they're volunteers, because they know something even bigger, that consciousness is eternal, that one lifetime of difficulty is nothing compared to the evolution it creates, that the soul that emerges from darkness is brighter than the one that never faced it. Amanda still had hard days, days when the pain was overwhelming, when the grief rose up, when the memory of trauma surfaced, but even on those days, she knew she'd asked for this, she'd chosen this, she was exactly where she was supposed to be, and she was strong enough to handle it, because she'd designed it that way, before birth, in the space between, when she'd looked at the hardest possible path and said, yes, I'll take that one, I ask for more. Some souls choose ease, some choose moderate challenge, and some choose to volunteer for the hardest lessons available, not because they're masochists, because they're committed to growth, to service, to becoming who they came here to be. Follow to discover what you chose before you forgot.